guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Mehna. I'm the chairman of the Economic Studies. After this meeting, it's a great pleasure to be here this morning to participate in the opening of this event. We're expecting the Palestine to join us.
وأعتقد أن نائب الوزيرة هو سوف يتحدث بالنيابة عنها أم أنها سوف تحضر إنني هنا بدلا أو بالنيابة عن سيدة أرحب بكم بالنيابة على المركز للدراسات الاقتصادية. أرحب بكم ترحيبا حارا لهذا المؤتمر السيد نيكولاس بينود رئيس مكتب الOECD منظمة التنمية التعاون الاقتصادي والتنمية. أود أن أرسل كل التحيات لمكتب الOECD لهذا التعاون الرائع لإخراج هذا المؤتمر إلى النور ولكي نتأمل أن نصل إلى مستوى عالي من النجاح ولتحقيق أهداف هذا المؤتمر. دعوني أيضا أن أنتهز هذه الفرصة لكي أشكر كل واحد منكم بوجودكم معنا اليوم. إنه لمن دواعي سرورنا أن تكونوا معنا وأن تشاركونا في هذا المؤتمر تحت عنوان إدارة أو تحقيق كيف يتحقق الإصلاح الاقتصادي على أرض الواقع في مصر. نبذة عن المركز المصري للدراسات الاقتصادية، فإن المركز يعتبر مركز غير ربحي الذي يقوم بالعديد من الأبحاث الاقتصادية المبنية على الأبحاث وعلى المناقشات بين أصحاب المصلحة وبين صانعي السياسات. هذا الموضوع هو من أولويات أجندة المركز المصري للدراسات الاقتصادية، حيث أن المركز دائما يحاول أن يواكب التغيرات الاقتصادية ويحاول تحقيق الإصلاح الاقتصادي ويحاول أيضا أن يساعد في تحقيق أهداف التنمية والإصلاح الاقتصادي. الآن أدعو السيد نيكولاس بينود رئيس مكتب
Office and G20, G7 sous-chef. Mr. Pinot, the floor is yours.
السيد نيكولاس فلتتفضل.
Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Minister, dear Abla, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be here and to represent the OECD in this conference. Maybe I can give you a bit of context on this conference, which actually is taking place in the context of the Compact for Economic Governance. And I want to thank, the representative of the German embassy, the chargé d'affaires, because all this has been made possible by the support of Germany, which actually launched this Compact on Economic Governance with the help and the support of the OECD in 2015. This was adopted indeed by the Deauville Partnership as a framework for reforms across Arab countries in transition, aimed at promoting good governance and a sound business climate as preconditions to boost inclusive growth. So the compact was designed not as a mere declaration, but rather as a sort of operational document, a sort of roadmap for reforms, if you will, to inform policy dialogue within the Deauville Partnership, in particular through a peer review and peer learning mechanism supported by the OECD. It was also framed and conceived through country-tailored implementation plans under which Arab countries in transitions identify specific policy measures which could then be supported by G7 and partner countries through technical assistance. And the OECD was actually asked to facilitate this process. So we are very pleased and very honored to be here today to precisely present the outcome of this work, and in particular the work that we did on Egypt, but we also worked on Jordan, Tunisia, Morocco. But today we are focusing on Egypt, and it's really a pleasure to be here with Dr. Abla El Alif, with whom we had a fantastic partnership over the last months to organize this conference. So I will present later on, after these opening remarks, the report, the stock-taking report that was commissioned by Germany, which I want to thank again. But for the time being, I will leave the floor to the Vice Minister. Thank you.
وزيرة التخطيط والتنمية الإدارية فلتتفضل.
Monsieur Nicolas Pinot, OECD Head of Shepherd Office, Mr. Mehna, Chairman of ETS, Dr. Abla El Alif, Executive Director of ETS, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It gives me great pleasure to be among you here today. Thanks to the OECD and the EES for organizing this event, which actually comes at a perfect timing to reflect the reforms undertaken by the government of Egypt. 3 years have started since 2016, the beginning of the economic reform program in Egypt. It is safe to say that it has bore fruits on the Egyptian economy on various fronts. This was the result of persistent efforts, a strong political will, and a commitment to the reform, despite challenges, which was actually conveyed in the stock-taking report prepared by the OECD. I'll start by briefly going through some of the main indicators that will reflect the success of the reform program. Then I will move into highlighting the main factors that contribute to the success of this program. Ladies and gentlemen, Egypt's homegrown economic reform was a much-needed, brave endeavor, developed by aligned economic team, supported by political leadership, and endorsed by international institutions such as the IMF and the World Bank and other multinational institutions. The program aimed to address key imbalances in the Egyptian economy, external imbalances and unsustainable fiscal deficit. And the aim of the program is to achieve macroeconomic stability, which is key for sustainable and inclusive economic growth. Starting in 2018, the program objectives started materializing following the implementation of major reforms, serving to cure the chronic imbalances in the economy. The results were acknowledged by multiple upgrades from international rating agencies and positive reviews by the IMF. By comparing Egypt's economic position in 2012-13 and the current economic standing of today, we find that there is positive progress that has been achieved in different fronts. If we start by the macroeconomy, growth in Egypt reached 5.3% in the financial year 2017-18 and 5.6% in the quarter 3 of 2018-2019. This is the highest level in 10 years. This is compared to a growth growth rate of only 2.2% during 2012-2013, which is, by the way, it is short of the population growth. This means that actually at that time we had a per capita negative growth rate. However, let me stop here for a second and say something, that growth is quite important. However, the inclusive growth is very, very important. Of course, we do remember, especially Egyptians, we remember the growth rate of 7.1, 7.2% before 2011. But despite this growth, lots of criticism on the fruits or the trickling down effect of the growth in Egypt at that period. So it is very important that the fruits of growth is not only focused or concentrated on some group of people, but it has to trickle down to different groups and the whole Egyptian citizens. So the point of having inclusive growth, I think this is quite important, and this is something that, as we're going to see, that this is something that is being focused upon in the Egyptian economic program. Going back, so let's talk about unemployment. Unemployment has almost reached 13% in the period between 2011 and 2013. And then after that, with the reform, unemployment started to wane down, and it had reached a minimum of 8.1% in March of 2019. And again, we need to have some qualification here. Unemployment is a very crude figure. It is true that we have a decline in the level of unemployment, but at the same time, it is very important to concentrate on the decent job creation. It's not only employment, it is the decent job. This is something that we have to focus on. Because, as we know, we have, for example, we have lots of informality in Egypt, and this is counted definitely in the rate of employment. But this is something that we, in the government, with the help of different development partners and the private sector, we need to focus more on creating more decent jobs in the formal economy. The net reserves, now it stood at $44 billion. That is allowed Egypt to have a buffer of 8.5 months of imports. This is up from 14.9 billion in June of 2013. Again, the very important indicator which is associated with the public finance. We always say that the budget deficit is the mother of all macroeconomic problems. This is not in Egypt, but this is worldwide. Now, the budget deficit in Egypt has reached 8.4% of GDP. And this is in 2018-2019. This is compared to 13% of GDP in 2012 and 2013. A very important also part of this reduction in the overall deficit is the achievement of a primary surplus of 0.2% in 2017-2018. This is the first time in 15 years. The success of the reform
من الممكن أن
could be attributed to a number of interdependent factors that were kept in mind during the design phase of the program. These factors have proven to be very critical to the success of any reform in Egypt, or even worldwide. And let me share with you three of these factors. The first thing is the sequencing of the reform. This is a very important factor. So the government of Egypt did not use a shock therapy in its reform, but it did its reform in a gradual way. So we have the flotation of the Egyptian pound in 2016. We have, even before that, we have the phasing out, the start of the phasing out of the energy subsidy that started in 2014. So it is very, very important to have the right sequence of reform in order to increase the probability of its success. And this is something that was part of the reform in Egypt. The second point is the importance of the social protection. We always know that this is, again, in all the stabilization and reform programs worldwide and in Egypt, there is a cost. And this cost sometimes is not even cost, i.e. that most of the cost is being bared by the low income or the vulnerable segment of the population. This is why an integral part of the reform is to have enough funds for social protection. So there is an increase of the funds for Takaful and Karama. We have the second Karim. This is for providing housing for low-income groups. And there is another important thing that is, sometimes it is kind of not very obvious, but it's important, that is the public investment. Again, one of the negatives, one of the things that have actually weakened the effect of the growth in Egypt before 2011 is the reduction in public investment, especially in health and education. This is something which is very, very important. So actually, despite the fact that before 2011 there is high growth, but the average Egyptian did not fear this growth. And a big part of it is because of the reduction in government investment or public investment in these areas. Now, we do learn from our mistakes. So, in this reform, we made sure, the government made sure, that there is an increase of funds dedicated for public investment, especially the human capital, the health and education, and definitely the infrastructure. So if you invest in this very key sectors, in this case, the average Egyptian citizen is going to feel that there is an improvement in the government service, there is an improvement in the quality of life of an average citizen, which is very, very important. The last thing of these factors is the transparency and communication. And this is very much associated with good governors, and I think this is something that the report of the OECD is concentrating on. Credibility is very, very important, and credibility is part of good governance. And communicating in an objective way the indicators, the challenges is key for the success of the program. And this is something that the government has focused on starting from 2016. So it is very important for people to understand what is going on, to understand the challenges in an objective way, and at the same time make sure that what is being announced is the true indicators and the true situation in Egypt. And this is something also from the side of the ministry that we are very much keen to provide. That is, for example, that we have the economic census that is going to end in a month or so. We want to make sure that the result of these census, the result of these different surveys that is done by CAPMAS, it is shared, it is disseminated in a proper way, because let's face it, in order to enhance private sector, in order to enhance investment, you need to reduce uncertainty. And you need to provide, as much as possible, accurate and timely information. And this is something that we are very keen to do and to provide. And again, this is part of good governors. To conclude, Egypt's successful experience could be summarized as follows. A reform program that is highly timed, backed by a strong and determined political will, strengthened by transparency, while indigenizing social protection to mitigate the costs of the program. Thank you for your attention and looking forward to today's fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
شكرا لك
Thank you, Dr. كمالى.
صباح الخير عليكم
Good
جميعا.
morning, everyone.
صباح الخير.
Mr. Mehna, Nicola, there's something wrong with this
هل
mic. Do you feel echo in the whole by any chance? You're okay?
ربما كان هناك عطل ربما كان
Okay, good morning, everyone, and I welcome all guests, distinguished ambassadors, OECD, EU, everybody, colleagues and friends. After what has been said, I will not take long in saying the opening remarks. I just want to say a couple of things. One, when looking at Egypt's modern economic history, this is not the first time that we do reform. We have done reform in 1974. We have done reform in 1991, jointly with the IMF. We have done efforts for reforms in 2003. Okay. We had the revolution in 2011, which was an indicator for the need for reform. And now we did the one that is in 2016. Keeping aside the 2016 one for a second, what has happened before is that our reform has never reached a real impact. It was either incomplete reform or missing items, okay, or not seeking sustainability. Okay. What we have in 2016 is our last attempt for reform. Okay. That has a lot of political support, and that seems to have at least the momentum for the continuation of it. Okay. However, for reform to reach the implementation, and this title is really a very telling title, making things happen, not just on paper, but rather in reality, there are core issues that are a must because they are drivers of change, okay? And there is contribution by stakeholders that is also a must. And this is where OECD and ECS were exactly on the same page. Okay? So the purpose of today's event is not just to discuss
a report that was prepared by OECD, but rather to focus on the issues that will make a very big difference and without which the reform cannot really take place. Okay? ECS is currently working very, very seriously, and I have my entire research team in the back table here sitting very politely like the hidden soldiers. Okay? We are working very hard on the assessment of the reform. We've already done that, and we're going to complete it, and I do expect to have a very big report, actually a book, by the end of this year with a complete full assessment that I think is going to be very useful. The issues that we agreed upon with OECD to discuss and focus on today are three issues, and they are really the core of everything. One is the inclusiveness of growth, and it's a must, without which we are not doing the right thing, and it's definitely not going to be sustainable. The second one is the transparency, okay? Transparency of the public institutions, and this is a small term that encloses also the institutional reform, the governance, which are key issues, again, without which you cannot do anything. And the third one is the business environment, because we need to encourage investment. And we're talking local investment even more than the foreign investment. Foreign investment will not come if the local investment does not come. So we are focusing the three sessions on this. The second and last point that I want to make, that we made sure that in every session we are actually having the following representation. The government saying its point of view of things, the private sector, because it is at the heart of the implementation of whatever reform, and then the civil society. If you do not have these three together, you do not have all the stakeholders, and you cannot do anything. So I hope that it's going to be a lovely day for you, and I invite my colleague Nikola from OECD to have a brief representation of the presentation.
بالاستماع إلى هذه المداخلات التي العودة التي تقدمها الزملاء.
Okay. So I have a presentation.
نستمع الآن إلى العرض التالي.
Yes.
هذا هو العرض.
Giving the floor for Nikola. We're giving the floor for Nikola to take the entire stage.
نعطي الكلمة للسيد نيكولا فليأخذ الكلمة وليأخذ الكلمة يأخذ المنصة لنفسه طوال الوقت. حسناً.
Okay. So it's there. Okay, very good. So thanks very much. I will present as an appetizer, so to speak, to the discussions during this conference our stock-taking report on Egypt, which was sponsored by the German authorities. So, like I said, this report fits into the Compact on Economic Governance. So I described already what the Compact is about. Maybe I should add that this compact is actually structured and organized around 4 pillars. The first one is on economic policy, macro and structural. The second pillar is about the efficiency of the public sector. The third pillar is about private sector development and the business environment. And the last pillar is more about the way the policy making is done, in particular the inclusive nature and the engagement with stakeholders in the context of the policy making. And in fact, we've decided to exactly organize this conference around the three first pillars of the Compact on Economic Governance. So maybe to start, I would like just to recall very quickly the macroeconomic performances of Egypt in the lead up to 2016, when this big push on reforms was given by the current government. The situation was indeed difficult, with a significant degradation of macroeconomic performances, significantly lower levels of growth, from an average of 5% during the period 2000-2010 to a growth that was around 2.7 on average between 2011 and 2016. And there are several factors behind this this trend. Obviously, there were exogenous shocks, the financial crisis worldwide in 2008 and 2009, sluggish growth in Europe, which is Egypt's main trade partner, a drop in financial support and remittances from the Gulf countries, and also the impact of regional security dynamics, especially on tourism and FDI in Egypt. But there were also very specific idiosyncratic factors specific to Egypt, macro imbalances and structural weaknesses. Of course, mounting inflationary pressures, a deterioration in the chronic twin deficits of Egypt, fiscal and current account deficits, which are a long-standing issue in the country. The fiscal deficit widened after 2011, raising challenges for debt sustainability over the medium to long term, with high budget deficits at around 10-13% of GDP compared to 7-8% during the period before. And this led to a substantial increase in public debt, close to 95% of GDP in 2016. Okay, so I need to speak slowly for our translation, sorry. So yes, fiscal deficits, twin deficits, fiscal and current accounts worsened over the period. A key structural factor behind the significant growth deceleration was the declining level of investment since 2011, from around 22% of GDP on average during the period 2010. Public and private investment reached a level of 14% only since 2013. And if you compare that to other countries in the region, like Jordan, Morocco, and Tunisia, Egypt is clearly underperforming. In Jordan, this is around 20% of GDP. In Morocco, around 30%, and in Tunisia, around 22%. There is also an issue with FDI, which went from close to 9% of GDP in some years in 2004-2008 to almost zero in 2011, and only reached 2% of GDP until 2015. So this is in this context that very ambitious reforms that the Vice Minister mentioned were implemented and started as part of also the IMF program of 2016. The first element of this reform program was, of course, the fiscal consolidation, with the introduction of value-added tax, but also significant reduction in fuel and electricity subsidies. There was obviously the move to a market-based exchange rate aimed at eliminating market distortions, stabilizing the foreign exchange regime, and increasing the availability of foreign exchange, while at the same time eliminating foreign exchange restrictions. On the structural side, the reform agenda was also pretty ambitious, with full-fledged reform of the business environment, a new investment framework that improves transparency over investor rights, institutional improvements such as reinforcing the role of GAFI in investment facilitation, as well as the streamlining of the dispute resolution framework, changes in regulation, everything from bankruptcy and insolvency law, licensing law, corporate law, significant liberalization of key economic activities, where in fact the importance of the public sector was a long-standing issue, for instance the electricity sector, and of course high-profile mega projects aimed at developing infrastructure, such as the landmark landmark expansion of the Suez Canal area and the construction of a new capital and massive investment in transportation. At the same time, and this was also mentioned by the vice ministers, reforms have been undertaken to make growth more inclusive and to mitigate those sort of supply-side reforms on the most vulnerable households. And in particular, the government implemented targeted social programs, you know, the cash transfer programs such as Takaful and Karama, for instance, but also replacing regressive and distorted subsidies, such as food subsidies, for instance, by much more targeted transfer programs. So what are the sort of outcomes of those reforms? In fact, what we see is that reforms are starting to bear fruit and to deliver concrete results. First of all, we have seen, as the Vice Minister mentioned, a growth acceleration since 2015, getting closer to what we consider being the growth potential of Egypt, around 6%. The country's twin deficits are narrowing somewhat. Inflation also is subsiding. And we saw also an increased market confidence in Egypt, which enabled the country to return to the international sovereign debt markets and to raise financing on international markets. Unemployment is also on the way down. It's now below 10% from 12.5% in 2016. But as Abla mentioned, the challenge is not only about macro stabilization, but this is really about making this macro stabilization really sustainable and durable over time. So for that, the government, I mean, this is one of the recommendations of the report, to really focus on the structural priorities now of the economy. And we, in fact, identified three key priorities. The first one, indeed, is to make sure that this growth is inclusive. And I will get back to this in a minute. We also, the government should also focus on improving and enhancing the transparency and efficiency of the public sector. And the third element is, of course, to continue reforming the business environment to give an impetus to private sector development. So when it comes to inclusive growth and trying to engineer a more inclusive type of growth, we need to take into account several issues that the Egyptian economy is facing. First of all, the issue of job creation, which has always been Egypt's key challenge for Egypt, even in period of high growth. If you look, for instance, at the period between 2000 and 2010, where you had spikes in growth, especially between 2005 and 2010. In fact, unemployment did not drop below 9%, and afterwards it reached about 13% in 2013. So this issue of unemployment has always been very salient, and there are also very significant variations in labor market outcomes across gender and age. For instance, 70% of Egyptian jobless are actually youth between 15 and 29 years old. Labor market participation is very low at 43%, and in particular women's labor market participation is only 23%. There are several factors behind this trend. The first one that I will get back to is the anemic growth of the Egyptian private sector, which we will further discuss during this conference. And this is actually pushing many Egyptians to the informal sector. And precisely, informality is also a key challenge in the economy, in the Egyptian economy. Jobs in the informal sector are almost by definition low paid, low quality, leading to low productivity, with an adverse impact in the end on the general productivity of the economy and its ability to position itself in global value chains. So there is a sort of a vicious circle of informality, low productivity, low growth that needs to be broken. There are other factors behind these labor market issues, which is of course the dynamic supply of labor with a very young population. There are 700,000 job seekers, new job seekers every year in the Egyptian labor market. So, and the economy is not generating enough jobs to absorb this labor supply. And there are also relatively high levels of public sector salaries at low skilled level workers, and this is creating a sort of a reservation wage compared to the private sector. Education is also a big issue. Obviously, there have been significant improvements in access with universal primary school, but at the same time, there is an issue with the quality of education. And when we look at the average years of schooling of population above 25 years old, it's only 7.6 years, which is below comparable countries, countries with a comparable level of development to Egypt. So there again, I mean, Egypt has probably some potential to improve those educational performances. Skills development beyond school remain also very underdeveloped. In particular, the level of skills and training provided by Egyptian firms remain very low by international standards. There is obviously the issue of the rising poverty, and if you look at the chart on the slide, as you can see, poverty has been on the rise, reaching almost 30%, and it's almost reaching 60% in rural Upper Egypt. And this is a bit puzzling because if you think of the size of and the cost of social programs in Egypt, it's around between 6 and 9% of GDP. The impact on poverty remains fairly limited and should be probably normally higher and more effective. So it really shows how somehow ineffective social programs in Egypt remain, and so there is an issue of effectiveness, equity, and targeting there that need to be further addressed, and the government is obviously working on that. There is obviously a need to further advance. So these are the recommendations on the labor market, but this will be further discussed today. So when it comes to the public sector, the efficiency of the public sector needs to be enhanced. The government is also taking bold reforms in this sector. And if we look at the Egyptian public sector, this is very large in comparative terms. It has continued to expand since 2011. It represents 6.5 million employees, 24% of employment. This is 3 times higher than countries such as Chile or Mexico or Morocco, which are at comparable stage of development. And also we've seen an increase in the wage bill related to the public sector until 2016. We also observed the absence of a modern public employment framework with adequate incentives, which is a major factor behind the poor quality of public services and limited government effectiveness. There is also the issue of state-owned enterprises, which play a major role in the economy, but at the same time, they suffer, those SOEs, they suffer from poor monitoring of financial and operational performance, poor corporate governance, and very often dependence on state subsidies. So reforms have been undertaken.
تؤثر على المؤسسات والجهات الأخرى التي تساهم في برنامج الإصلاح الاقتصادي.
So reforms have been undertaken, such as the 2016 administrative strategy that sets forth an ambitious framework for reforming the bureaucracy, but it's too early to see the impact of this reform. There have been also some significant steps to reduce and limit the rise in the wage bill related to the public sector, and there we can see an impact indeed since 2016. But when it comes to state-owned enterprises, we must say, I mean, our assessment is that somehow less attention has been paid to the corporate, to the governance of these big SOEs, and this is probably an issue that should be further tackled by the government. There is obviously the issue of transparency and corruption. Corruption is a lingering problem in the country, and if you look at international rankings, I'm just referring to the Transparency International ranking, Egypt is not performing very well compared to other countries in the same league, but Janos Bertok, my colleague, will elaborate on that. Public procurement is characterized by excessive use of direct contracting, which of course reduces transparency and the active and fair participation of bidders. But there again, some reforms have been made. A new anti-corruption strategy is being implemented with a strengthened anti-corruption agency. There is a new public procurement law that has been recently approved to enhance transparency, reduce direct contracting, and reserve 10% of public procurement to SMEs. So this is going in the right direction. Tax revenue is also a big issue with a narrow tax base in Egypt. Tax revenue remains below 15% of GDP in Egypt in 2018. This is again below comparable countries. It's 22 in Morocco, it's 23 in Tunisia, and in OECD countries it's around 34%. Tax evasion remains high. It's estimated at 4% of government revenue. And there is also the issue of the personal income tax, the importance of which in the total tax revenue has been declining over time, and perhaps there is too much reliance on the VAT. Okay, so now building to the last pillar very quickly. The business environment and the development of the private sector, which is really also a key issue for the country and for the Egyptian economy. As I said at the beginning, investment remains low in Egypt, and the investment to GDP ratio is around 15% compared to 30% in Morocco, for instance. A key element explaining this performance is the failure of the financial sector to play its intermediation role and to turn savings into productive investment. And at the same time, most probably, I mentioned the role of SOEs in the economy. The development of the private sector is somehow constrained and impeded by the importance of the public sector and government ownership in the economy. The private sector itself is dominated by micro, small and medium enterprises, and those companies, they face strong limitation in their development when it comes to productivity, investment in human capital, in development more generally, and these 2 million SMEs, they represent 90% of active enterprises. So really focusing on SMEs is obviously a key issue. I mentioned also FDI at the beginning of the presentation. This remains a challenge for the country, especially to attract, diversify FDI. If you look at the structure of FDI in Egypt, it's very much concentrated in a few sectors: oil and mining, real estate, which account for 75% of FDI. And if you compare the basket of FDI and the basket of exports from Egypt to similar countries like Tunisia, Morocco, clearly there is a lack of diversification in Egypt, and this is an area where Egypt could certainly do better. To accelerate the development of the private sector, we also need to look at the financial sector itself, which, as I said, is not probably playing the role it should play. The share of total credit channeled to the private sector has decreased constantly since the early 2000s, and this is well well below what we see, for instance, in Jordan, Morocco, and Tunisia. It's around 30% of GDP, while it's around 65, 80% in those countries. And probably there are several factors: the lack of competition in the financial sector, the fact that there is huge government borrowing need, which is crowding out credit to the private sector. Also, the low levels of financial literacy and financial infrastructure. So this is in a nutshell what is encapsulated in our stock taking report. And so it's really a sort of a iceberg view of the economy. Obviously, the various sessions that will follow will give us the opportunity to look deeper into each and every area that I've just mentioned. So thanks again for the support. Thanks again to ECS and ABLA for the opportunity to present this report. And happy to continue the conversation during the conference. Thank you very much.